Hey, everybody. In this episode, the new co-CEOs of DC Studios have finally revealed their plans for their film and television universe. We're going to dig into it right now on Flicker Effect, episode 430. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Happy February 1st.
Hey. What'd you say, David? You got to lower the music first?
Sorry, I said happy February 1st.
Oh.
It is February 1st.
I completely heard that wrong. I don't know where.
What did you think I said?
It sounded like you had to turn the music down first, like you couldn't hear what we were saying.
The music. Completely different direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, welcome everybody. For those of you listening and not watching, if you can't see, I'm joined by Bobby Jackson and Jascha Wilson. The three of us have plenty to discuss today. We will be digging into the big news from yesterday, and that is that the new co-CEOs, James Gunn and Peter Safran, have finally revealed their plans, at least for the beginning of their venture over at Warner Brothers in DC, at DC Studios. I guess they're calling this they're not calling it a phase, calling it chapter 1 of their plans. I can tell you I'm excited to discuss this.
Marvel. They can't be exactly like
Gods
Marvel.
and Monsters. There is a
That's
Gods and Monsters.
Yeah, chapter 1, Gods and Monsters, is what they're calling this. A quick recap, I guess, for anybody maybe not really aware of the situation before we dig into this. I won't, talk about this too long. But, we had a new regime come in to Warner Brothers, and then not long after, I don't forget how long Zaslav has been in power, but he finally hired James Gunn and Peter Safran to be the co-CEOs of DC Studios. They've only been in the position officially for 3 months now. I think their first day was November 1st. And
wow, has it just been 3 months?
Yeah, it hasn't been that long.
Feels like forever.
It didn't take too long for James Gunn to say, "Hey, I'm going to put out my plans sometime in January." Which, we talked about it in a previous episode. I was kind of surprised he was going to go ahead and reveal stuff so soon. But January was chugging along. We were coming up toward the end of it. I think all of us were like, so is this still happening? He definitely waited until the last minute. It was on Monday, the 30th, that they had a press conference. And it wasn't until the next day, yesterday, on the 31st, last day of the month, that they revealed to the world their plans for this first part of this new DC universe they're creating. There's a YouTube video with James Gunn kind of describing all the details that they're revealing so far about this first chapter of the universe. If you're on YouTube, there's a link down below in our show notes. You can check out that video if you haven't watched it. Did both of you guys watch that video?
Yep.
Yeah.
Multiple times, actually.
Multiple times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I watched it one and like bits and pieces of the second part. And I think you have something that you there. I just want to correct you on one of the things that you said. It took them 3 months not to just to announce his plans, but to shit on everybody's hopes and dreams as we move forward with people that we don't know anything about, and completely decimate any hopes of bringing back Henry Cavill or maybe even a lot of the other cast members from the previous DCU.
Well, I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of disagreements going on in this conversation.
I'm choosing violence, guys. I'm bringing the pain. Okay, let's fucking go. Let's go. I'm here for it all. I'm bringing all the smoke. Look, I'm just trying to keep the same energy that I've kept for, I don't know, what has it been? Maybe the past 8 years, 7 years since I've joined with you guys, and I've even wrote an article for the website saying that Warner Brothers does not know what to do with their properties, and I stand by that. I still stand by that, and we'll
You
get
still have no
into
hope
more.
that the you still have no hope that the new
Well, no,
regime is
no,
going
no,
to make things better,
no,
is
no,
what it
no.
sounds
I
like.
mean, well, no, I mean, we'll get into my opinions later on as we move forward. I didn't want to interrupt the introductions and everything like that too
Mm.
much here. So
No, no problem, man.
let's dive in.
Let's dive in. There's lots to talk about. Um, Not only just the kind of slate of film and television stuff that they plan on doing, but in that press conference, since they talked to reporters, there's also a lot of questions they answered regarding some of the stuff like you talked about, Yasha, like what's going to happen with some of those previous actors. What about the Batgirl like film fiasco? What about Ezra Miller and the Flash? We'll get to all that in a little bit. I was thinking we'll just kind of cover what they announced that they're going to be starting off with in this new universe. I don't know about you guys. I've been of two mindsets on how to approach this. Either just kind of run through all of it, or maybe I'm kind of leaning more toward let's maybe do this in sections. And I'm thinking I'm going to start off with what they plan on bringing to the big screen, what their film plans are. We'll talk about that a little bit, and then I'll talk about the live action and the animated series stuff that they plan on doing, which sounds like it's mostly or completely on HBO Max. So, you guys
Well,
good with that or thoughts? What do you think?
I would say I am good with that for sure. But there was also mentioned. I kind of want to at least touch on. We don't have to spend too much time on it, but touch on at least some of the stuff that James Gunn said for what we already have coming out planned before his stuff starts.
Yeah, I mean, he touched on the fact that we have what four films still
Yeah,
coming out, basically from the old regime before his their new films kind of get started, new films and TV shows get started. You might actually remember, Bobby, some more details about those. I'm trying to remember the order. I mean, we know we have Shazam: Fury of the Gods coming up first.
right.
If you watch that video, he definitely kind of I forget the way he words it. He definitely says like Shazam if already seems to be kind of existing in his own like corner of the DCEU where he's basically
Yeah.
been separated from everything else going on. So he kind of worded things in a way that made it sound like it would be easy to continue to have Zachary Levi as Shazam and keep Shazam basically the same in this new universe and to not really like kind of be funky or affect things. Am I wrong in saying that?
No, that's dead on. I think
Yeah.
that's the way he sounded when he put it that way.
Yeah.
That Shazam would continue on into the current DCU because he did say DCU. It wasn't even like he said, the way he put it by saying DCU and by saying he was in his own corner already. Sound like it said that it'd be easy enough to slot him into this new DCU universe because there wasn't a lot of ties to the DCEU stuff. So
Right.
that's what it sounded like. Yeah.
That is what it sounded like. After that, we have the Flash, which we've talked about many times over. We've all discussed the situation there and how much this has been delayed and the Ezra Miller kind of drama surrounding this film. He definitely points out the fact that this movie is, and again, I'm just mostly referencing the video he put out to the public. Points out the fact that this movie will kind of act as a kind of a reboot going into the DCU, which makes sense since from what we know about this story. The one thing I find interesting about that is what I'm going to get to next, which is there's still two more films though being released after that movie, part of the old regime. That's Blue Beetle and the new Aquaman film. Any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, so it sounded like the way he put it, once again, it sounded like there's room for Blue Beetle into this new DCU because he didn't make it sound as though he almost said something very similar to about the way he said Shazam and how he kind of was his own thing and in his own place. So it made it sound like that he could be there as well. And then for the Aquaman movie, I don't recall exactly what he said there,
I think he was a little
but
more cryptic with that one, if I remember
yeah,
correctly.
yeah. So I don't exactly know, but in either within that article, or either within that video or within an article that the press was asking him questions, the idea was, could we see some of these actors returning? And he didn't say no. He said that something to the effect of like, the possibilities are there, that we could have some of these actors back in these in this world of DCU. And I just looked online and saw something. I don't know where this exactly came from, but it is Gunn quoted, and it said, "When does the DCU canon start, and will actors come back?" And Gunn responded with, "The one thing that we can promise is that everything from dot 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 our first project, Creature Commandos, forward will be canon and will be connected. We're using some actors from the past. We're not using other actors from the past, but everything from that moment forward will be connected and consistent."
And
So
I
it
mean,
does
since you're
sound that
talking
way.
about, and since you're talking about that, I do have a couple quotes as well. I got these from IGN. Um, and I'll back up a little bit. Gunn was asked which actors from the old DCEU, which started with Man of Steel and still has a handful of films to go, including The Flash, would be included in the new universe. Despite saying that some decisions have been made, Gunn didn't give much away regarding what those were, or even if they've made decisions at all for some actors. Then he went on, quote, "We have made decisions, some we don't know," he said. "We've talked to Gal Gadot. She's up for doing stuff. We're not sure if we're going to do that, what we're going to do with that." Where Gunn was certain, however, was in the status of the DCEU's original two premier actors, Cavill as Superman and Ben Affleck as Batman. Quote, "All I can tell you right now is Harry and Ben are not a part of this universe," he said.
Henry.
Henry. So
Yeah, odd, odd. I don't understand that, really, honestly. I
you don't.
don't. I can understand Ben. Because he's sort of been vocal about the fact that he's pretty much done. And I think he maybe have came back for a cameo in one or two of these movies here, but um, for the most part, we knew he was done. Where it gets confusing is with the Cavill of it all, because it seemed like he was back. He was asked on the Josh Horowitz podcast if he was back, and he's pretty much said like, "Yeah, I'm going to be Superman again." So that all seemed all well and good. Um, where I guess I get a little confused in the messaging here is because you're having some actors come back, so that means that I am assuming, playing the same roles that they played in the DCEU, they will be playing them in the DCU. And so he had already gone on record as saying, "Well, with Superman, I want to go younger." Okay, okay,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't understand, in a sense, how that. I guess for all intents and purposes, there's a lot of open questions that either he can't answer because they will be answered in the movies or whatever of canon, or they don't know the answer to. But I'm hoping that the answer as to why we have some actors portraying the characters that they were portraying before, and why we need a new actor to play a character that's been around in the DCEU, will become more obvious once we see the Flash movie. I'm really hoping that that is going to explain it in a way that makes sense, because just reading it and trying to understand what he's saying, it's hard for me to parse the exact reasons as why there's returning actors, as opposed to, if you're rebooting, why wouldn't you have new actors in these character roles? So I don't know, David, did you feel like you kind of understand what he's going for here? Because I really am a little confused as to what he's going for.
I guess I'm not as confused by it. I mean, as we're going to get to with a show that's, was announced, Waller, we know Viola Davis is going to come back as that character. In one sense, it's a, I mean, it's not a small character, but compared to our superheroes, it's a smaller character that her existence in the DCU is such where it's like, I don't have a problem with her basically continuing that role, even if technically it's like this universe is different from the one we saw her in before. I don't have an issue with that. When it comes to Shazam, yeah, like those movies haven't really intertwined with anything else in the DCEU so far. I mean, we saw Superman, but we didn't because we didn't see his face, you know. So I don't really have an issue with the fact if they decide. It sounds like, and I say this, and it doesn't sound like that they've come to some decision that Zachary Levi is definitely going to continue as Shazam. But if they do decide to continue to use him, I don't know. I could see that being done in a way that it's fine. But I don't imagine they will reuse any of the other actors. I mean, he seems to be kind of dancing around certain aspects of it. Like for instance, Aquaman. You know, he's not outright saying like, "Hey, we're not going to use Jason Momoa as Aquaman anymore." But at the same time, and we still have an Aquaman film that's coming out, so maybe it's understandable that he's not like going to definitively say that until after that movie's out and made money. And then he would say, "Yeah, well, you know, Jason Momoa, well, he's probably going to be in some other role in the future, but not as Aquaman." And you know, maybe they want to have a relationship with Gal Gadot where she could appear in some way and maybe another kind of part or something. But I would be shocked if she comes back as Wonder Woman. I don't know how much that would make any sense to me. And I say that as someone I think she's great as Wonder Woman. And I mean, when it comes to Henry Cavill, we all know like that situation with, you know, and Gunn says how he was dicked around. He specifically is quoted as saying that Cavill was dicked around by the old Warner Brother regime. It was a messed up situation, but at the same time, I think it's best that he's not going to come back. And it sounds like if you're going the route you're going with the Superman film that they announced, which we'll get to in a little bit, yeah, you're going with the younger Superman. Why would Cavill also still be involved in some way? It doesn't really make sense unless it were some Elseworld film. You know, which in the slate of things they've announced, there is definitely, you know, they are doing that where they are having the Matt Reeves Batman universe be DC Elseworld like labeled film franchise. Same with the Joaquin Phoenix Joker stuff. So I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of questions, but I don't so much think it's odd about Henry Cavill. And I think maybe we either disagree there or I don't know.
I think what makes it odd to me is that okay, again, we're going to get to the Superman of it all, but why is that the one character that's going to be younger compared to everyone else? Like the fact that you say that you don't think that Gal Gadot will be back as Wonder Woman, but will be reused in some other sense. Well, that to me doesn't make sense. Like, why wouldn't she be back as Wonder Woman if you're going to have her back at all?
I could also see they're saying that to leave doors open for any possibility. Sure. But will she really be back? Probably not. I mean, same, you know, Momoa, we've talked about a role that he could possibly play that just kind of makes sense. It seems like perfect casting. So that I get. But what would Gal Gadot do? I don't imagine she'll actually come back whatsoever. But
so maybe what he's saying is the door is open for these actors to come back, but that could just be him saying things that he can't really deliver on right now and doesn't want to say no, they're not coming back. Yeah. It could be that.
It's the same with Ezra Miller. I think Peter Safran is quoted. I don't have those right in front of me, but was quoted as saying like, well, Ezra Miller is going through a lot and they are working on themselves and basically we'll cross that bridge when we get to it with them. But again, that's a movie that's not out yet. I think they're just leaving certain things close to the chest, especially until after these movies that they didn't even make come out and make whatever money they're going to make before they say anything. So I think some people
looks like Jascha has something to say. yeah, I could be reading into it. Yeah. Go ahead, Jascha.
You know what? No, I mean, honestly, I mean, there's really not much to really address like what you guys have talked about right now. Like, I mean, especially like even with the Waller thing, like when we've talked about, you know, just talking about that, Viola Davis, I think that's a perfect casting type of situation. And whether she's And I understand how weird this sounds because I pick and choose which parts that I'm kind of excited about when it comes to what they're doing, right? And I'm totally acknowledging the fact that it may be a little bit of a double standard when it comes to that. But it's like, I really, really enjoy Viola Davis's work, and I really like her character and her portrayal of Waller in the DCU. Like, I think she's a perfect fit for it. So it's like I'm actually kind of interested in seeing that. And like, there's listening to the whole plan or chapter 1 of what he's planning to do. Like, honestly, it all sounds fun. It all sounds kind of interesting. There's only one part of the project that I'm not necessarily super excited about, but that's just because I just don't particularly care about that character. But I can see how it would fit, and it could be really interesting when it comes to that. But yeah, when it comes to like what they have coming out this in the next year and a half, right, or the next year, I mean, you're not wrong. Like, I mean, it's like, I mean, I really think he's just like, let's just see what these do, and then we can make adjustments and decisions as they lie. Like with the Shazam movie, Zachary Levi, and then, you know, taking into the fact that he's starting to be a little controversial with some of the stuff that he's throwing out there. And I'm sure there are people that just combing through some of his old tweets, just ready to bring up shit and start a fire just because. I still like the guy, and I still don't mind the movies. I'm interested to see what this Shazam is like. I mean, I did have some reservations and issues with the first one, but it's like, you're right, David. I mean, he kind of fits into his own little world and own little universe where he just doesn't necessarily, or hasn't necessarily fit in with everything. They talk about these other characters and these other heroes, or they have, you know, the Superman one, but they haven't actually addressed too much anything else when it comes to that. And then, the other movie that you guys mentioned, like the Aquaman movie, David, I know you're super hyped to see that one. I know you can't wait. I know you're excited.
Oh my God, I can't wait.
Oh my God, I can't wait. It's just going to be so good.
So
you're going to see Jason Momoa with his shirt off. It's going to be so hot. But it's like, you know, you're right. I mean, if he doesn't continue with that character, there's another character that literally is written for the guy that he would probably fit more into than anybody that I can possibly think of right now when it comes to,
right,
you know, playing that role. And I mean, aside from that, like, I mean, making a younger Superman and whatnot, and I don't understand, like you said, you know, with Henry Cavill being dicked around like he was, I just think it was messed up. And then the fact that they allowed Dwayne Johnson to put him in the end of the movie of Black Adam, like with the hopes that this is just going to finally come to fruition, was just like, that was definitely wrong. They shouldn't have done that. But that just reinforces my point where it's like they have no idea what they were doing or what they're going with. But that being said, and moving forward, I think Gunn probably has a gigantic whiteboard in his office with people, and they're just time and plotting things out and what they're going to work with. I love the guy's work. I don't think I remember watching anything that he's done as of late, especially with these superhero movies, that I haven't particularly enjoyed. Maybe I've enjoyed some things over the others a little bit more, but I trust him, and I'm hopeful that he's really going to do it justice like he says he does. He plans on it.
But I mean,
a little bit more positive than what you were expecting, huh?
So far, a little more positive.
Yeah, so
we haven't gotten to the thick of it.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, since we're still talking about the 4 films, part of the DCEU, I mean, I think the one thing I find odd and just so confusing, and I'm sure there's a reason why, you know, James Gunn in his video points to the fact that the Flash film seems like a good kind of reboot going into the DCU, right? But again, we have 2 movies after that. I imagine there's a good reason those 2 movies are coming after that movie, either because of events. But it seems like, other than whatever good reasons we don't know about, it seems like, well, why isn't The Flash the last film before we move into this DCU stuff? Again, I'm sure there's a reason. I'm just curious to see what it is, because if indeed, like, Aquaman is not going to be in this new DCU, which I don't think he probably should be, like, then why is that being held until after? Again, I'm sure there's a good reason. I'm just curious to see it.
Well, especially with the whole, like you said, that it's going to be a gigantic reset. If he's saying that it's going to be a gigantic reset, it's like, why, you know, like you said, like, why have the reset and then have these other 2 movies that are building up for a story that we probably won't ever get to see. Like, let's be real. Like, I mean, kind of like the Justice League building up to the battle with Doomsday, not Doomsday, Darkseid, excuse me.
Right.
And we're never going to see that in that framework, like in that storyline, the Zack Snyder framework. Mm-hmm. We might see him maybe start to show up a little bit in the next DC, the next iteration with James Gunn. I mean, I can't think of. I mean, off the top of my head, I just can't think of any other big baddies kind of like Darkseid. And I know that the DCU has. I know DC has big villains and stuff like that. But I mean, let's be real. Darkseid is definitely one of the all-time greats and one of the all-time favorites because he's one that can actually go head-to-head with Superman.
Right. Bobby, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say that maybe because those stories for those two movies are going to be pretty standalone, they don't feel they're not worried about having them come after Flash. That's the only thing I could think of, really.
They're basically already DC Elseworld properties at that point.
Yeah,
in a way.
Yeah.
And again, also, so since we were talking about the Henry Cavill of it all, there were a couple more quotes that Gunn kind of talked about that further. He said, also important to say that Henry Cavill was not fired. Gunn added, Henry was just not hired to be Superman in the Superman movie. There was never a deal there for another movie. I like Henry. I think he's a great guy, Gunn said. I think he's getting dicked around by a lot of people, including the former regime at this company. But this Superman is not Henry for a number of reasons.
I actually love that quote because I feel like he just gets down right to the nitty gritty of it. And
it's not holding back.
Bosses be damned. Well, yeah, bosses be damned. He's like, yeah, you guys fucked with this guy and his wallet and his emotions and a character that fans loved to see. Maybe the Man of Steel movie didn't do exactly what you were trying to project or wanted to see, but the movie still made money. Like you just dicked around this guy for the past, 10 years, 13 years since that movie came out, something like that. 14 years, 2013, so almost 10 years. 10 years exactly, actually, 10 years this year. Yeah. And it's like, I mean, I love the fact that he just owned it. He was like, yeah, no, we didn't fire him. He just wasn't hired. I love that energy. Like, that's dope.
But let's dig into the slate. And actually, I'll just start from the beginning. TV and film, we'll go through all of it. As we talk about these, if we want to go ahead and comment on stuff, we'll go ahead and dive in, or I'll just keep going. We'll play it by ear. We'll just go with the flow. First thing he mentioned was an animated series that apparently is already in production. And this is Creature Commandos. And I'm going to read from the Hollywood Reporter write-up on this. A 7-episode animated series written by Gunn that is already in production. Originally a team of classic monsters assembled to fight Nazis, this is a modern take on the concept. The voice actors have yet to be cast, but the executives are looking to find people who can voice the animated characters and also portray the live-action versions when the anti-heroes show up in movies and series. And yeah, it's my understanding. I assume this animated series will be on HBO Max.
Looking at it right now, yeah, I'm with you, Bobby. I love it too. But looking at it, it's like there's only when he says like, "Hey, I'm looking for characters that can do the voice acting and then the live action." You look at these characters, and there's really only one person there that doesn't really need a whole lot of makeup. Everybody else is like complete CGI or complete complete makeup from head to toe. So I'm interested to see how that works out. But I don't know anything about these characters, but I am, I'm interested, and I'll give it a shot because Gunn's doing it.
Yeah, if we had an image, there's a character that's in there that looks like Weasel from James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. So if they're fighting Nazis, Weasel. I don't know. Well, that's what I was going to say. If they're fighting Nazis, I guess that Weasel character is pretty old, or maybe it was a different one, or it's a different continuity. Maybe I don't know. But right. At the very least, what I love about it is the fact that we know James Gunn knows really well how to take a ragtag group of people and make them into something that everyone ends up loving. I mean, no one outside of the hardcore people knew who Guardians of the Galaxy was before that movie came out, and he made everyone love a squirrel. I mean, a raccoon and a tree.
Dare you call
And
Rocket a
so
squirrel?
Yeah,
yeah, right, a rabbit.
trash panda.
So yeah, so it's, he can do that, and with this, it's like he said. I think also within the framework of him talking about the show is that being in animated form, it allows the people to go a little bit more bigger and wilder with the story that they want to tell. And it's 7 episodes that he wrote himself, so he's hands in and hands on with this particular one. So that makes me excited, especially the fact that they will also be able to be seen in live action, and having the people who voice the actors who voice the characters in animated will then be the same people portraying them in live action.
Moving on from that is a live action series, and this is Waller. Again, reading from the Hollywood Reporter. In a spinoff of Gunn's own HBO Max hit series Peacemaker, Viola Davis will return as the ruthless and morally ambiguous head of a government task force. It is being written by Crystal Henry from Watchmen and Jeremy Carver, the creator of the Doom Patrol TV series. That's all I got on
Solid.
that.
I mean, hearing that, it sounds good. Like it's going to be very weird and very dark, but also very good.
Yeah. No,
I imagine that one will be really good too, because I feel like with the pedigree of the people who are working on it, the fact that one person was from the Watchmen and the other person was from the
Doom Patrol.
Doom Patrol. I watched the first couple seasons of Doom Patrol, and I thought it gets really wacky and weird, but in interesting ways. And I think they can go that route too with Waller's series, especially since she is, for all intents and purposes, a Nick Fury of the DC universe. She has the ability to call upon so many different people, whether they're heroes or villains, and so you never know who might even end up popping up in that show, especially the way Gunn wants to keep things so interconnected between animated live action series, and I think he said video games as well. So
yeah,
we'll see how that part works out too. So yeah.
And then that brings us to our first film, Superman Legacy. The movie featuring the Man of Steel that Gunn is writing and may direct, although no commitments on that end have been made. While the two previous titles are meant to be aperitifs in Safran's words, Superman is the true kickoff of the duo's DCU plans. It's not an origin story, Safran said. It focuses on Superman balancing his Kryptonian heritage with his human upbringing. He is the embodiment of truth, justice, and the American way. He is kindness in a world that thinks that kindness is old-fashioned. A release date of July 11th, 2025 has been penciled in for this one.
When do you think we'll get an announcement for who's going to actually be Superman?
I think
like I've seen different. Yeah, you would think this summer, right? Like maybe this summer.
Yeah.
I mean, with that date, 2025.
Yeah, with that date, they have to. In fact, they probably already know. They probably already know or have deep into discussions with whichever actor that they are trying to choose.
Yeah.
So, I think.
And how many pictures?
Yeah,
how many movie deals are going to have? Yeah.
It's going to be extensive, I imagine, because there's another announcement that we'll get to that I think ties into that. But for me, I don't really have too much to say on this other than I am looking forward to seeing who they cast and other than the fact that I like the take that they're going with, that he will be the Superman that we've always known and loved him to be from the comics, or at least I have. I know some people don't like the aspect of him being so good, but I've always liked that.
No, I'm with you. I like that idea that they're going for that, but at the same time recognizing that this isn't the same world that we saw, like the first Superman film with that kind of Superman in it. The world's a different place,
Right.
but kind of exploring that situation of a Superman that is kind in a world that, you know, thinks kindness is old fashioned, as he said. I don't know. I think it's an interesting and good idea, and I like the idea that they're going with a younger Superman. Which I'm with you, Bobby, is kind of interesting. If even though like we're going to get to a Batman
Hmm.
announcement here in a little bit, there's no official word on how old the Batman is, but and we'll get to that. But I don't know. It seems like he could be older, which I find kind of interesting, and I'm not sure what I think about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, moving on next to another live action television series, and at least on the TV side of things, this is probably the one I'm most excited about, and that's Lanterns. Greg Berlanti's long in the works Green Lanterns TV series has been scrapped, and Gunn and Safran have parted ways with the longtime DC series steward. In its place will be a new take on the space cops with power rings. Our vision for this is very much in the vein of True Detective, Safran described. It's terrestrial based. It will feature prominent Lantern heroes Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart, and is one of the most important shows they have in development. This plays a really big role in leading into the main story we are telling across film and TV. End quote. I'm
So
Yeah,
pumped
I
about
love
this.
that.
yeah.
Yeah,
I was
I'm
gonna say,
jazzed
David,
about
why is
this as
that your
well.
most
I,
exciting?
I mean, I am very excited to see a take on Green Lantern and the Lanterns that is good. um,
Hmm.
of all the DC comics I read a lot of Green Lantern when I was pretty young. So I have some familiarity with it, and yeah, I mean, I've been waiting all this time for all these random announcements that Warner Brothers had been making about, you know, if we're doing another Green Lantern film or if we're doing a TV series, and none of it went anywhere. So this sounds really good. It sounds very HBO like. I mean, they're comparing it directly to True Detective, an HBO property. Yeah, no, I think it just sounds really good. I'm interested.
This has the potential to be very, very cool, I think, especially if they're going in the vein of True Detectives, the kind of gritty type of murder mystery, or maybe not even murder, but just mystery type of thing traveling all over the universe. I'm with you, David. I did read some reading with the Lanterns when I was younger, and I did
Mm.
enjoy them, and this has the potential to be very, very cool.
I agree. I think that based on the fact that, like you said, it involves a larger thing going on, it'll be interesting to see what that thing is or ends up being, and what it ties into. And one thing that came to my mind is I know there's a storyline in the comics that at some point the Guardians are sort of turn against the Lanterns in some way. I
Mm.
don't remember exactly how that is, but I wonder if there's something that would be interesting as a True Detective story where, you know, these are the people who give them their rings in the first place, and they're trying to hunt down something, and it ends up being that they're the cause, and the Lanterns have to fight against their own sort of quote unquote creators kind of thing. But
Right.
you know, any direction they go with it, I think I'll be on board for. I'd say the only thing that I had a little bit of sadness for and twinge of disappointment was that with Berlanti's show that he was going to do, he considered it a space opera. And so I'll miss that aspect of them being in space and getting to interact with other lanterns. And you never know. I'm sure he did say that other lanterns will pop up in this series.
Yeah.
Didn't make mention of which specific ones. But, you know, I now with a lot of stuff we see on TV and how capable it is to be on other planets and do it, whether you're doing it, you know, on the volume or shooting some location stuff that makes it look real,
Hmm.
that would have been a cool thing to see. But I think we'll still get there at some point where we'll get lanterns in space and doing all that stuff as well. But they're starting
Yeah.
Earthbound, and I think that's probably a good way to go to.
Yeah. Moving on to another film that was announced. This is The Authority. Again, I'm reading from Hollywood Reporter. I am for all of these. A movie based on a team of superheroes with rather extreme methods of protecting the planet that first originated in the late 1990s, under an influential imprint known as Wildstorm, run by artist and now head of DC Publishing Jim Lee. One of the things of the DCU that is that it's not just a story of heroes and villains, said Gunn. Not every film and TV show is going to be about a good guy versus a bad guy. Giant things from the sky come and the good guy wins. There are white hats, black hats, and gray hats, added Safran. They are kind of like Jack Nicholson and A Few Good Men. They know that you want them on that wall, or at least they believe that. I'm not really familiar with this side of DC, I'll fully admit, so I don't really have an opinion on it, other than the fact that it sounds really interesting to me. And it does seem like the kind of thing that James Gunn is quite good at anyway. I don't know how much involvement he will have in this other than just producing it or as a head of DC Studios, but it sounds interesting, but I'm not familiar with the comic book property.
I'm not
as familiar either. I would. Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm not either. So I'm just kind of like, I'll give it a shot. I mean, just seeing that, with him mentioning the late 1990s, I'm super excited to see what music he brings to all of these properties, all these products that he's about to release. Because I mean, he always selects such fun music to put to his movies and to his shows.
Bobby, you were going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think that even though I'm not as familiar with it, I do know certain aspects of it. And I believe there's one particular aspect that people will have some issues with. And it's probably the same people who had issues with episode 3 of The Last of Us, particularly. But we shall see about that. But as far as a team goes, it really sounds like it could be the potential to be something similar to The Boys, but DC's version of that to a certain degree.
Right.
What I find interesting about it is that the Authority is a team of superheroes. And for anyone, if you want to look them up, there are certain characters that are mirror images of DC characters we already know. So there's a character that kind of looks like Batman. There's a character that's kind of like Superman. I think his name is Atlas. And there's these characters that are kind of like ones we already know. And that's sort of a byproduct of them being part of a different studio before DC ended up, taking them over or whatever. But what's interesting about that is that there is a superhero team that exists.
I don't know if I over losing
Even though
Bobby.
we don't have a Justice League. Sorry, am I still here?
Now you're back. You were breaking up a little bit.
Okay.
Now I can hear you.
Okay, so we have this superhero team that's not the Justice League. A superhero team has formed, and it's not the Justice League. And we have seeds so far that have been mentioned. So you've got Green Lantern, Superman. Nothing in terms of some of these other characters that we know, but at some point, it'll be interesting to see if they the mention I had earlier about Superman was that, from what I remember Gunn saying, that they will be using some of their big key characters and people to help introduce people you don't know, to anchor. He may have mentioned Superman within that context of his relation to the Authority. So that could be one of those things where whoever signs on to the role to play Superman will be appearing in a lot of different things, possibly. And this being one of them, the Authority movie, to help sort of center them based on just seeing him in his own movie.
Right. Moving on to another television series, Paradise Lost. The duo describes this HBO Max series as a Game of Thrones style drama set on the all-female island that is Wonder Woman's birthplace, Themyscira. Filled with political intrigue and scheming between power plays, it takes place before the events of the Wonder Woman films. Which is an interesting thing to point out,
Again,
since the Wonder Woman films
yeah,
apparently are part of this universe. So why even say that?
Yeah, why? Yeah,
I
exactly.
don't know.
yeah. This one is one that it sounds good on paper. It'll be interesting to see. It's something that we don't have currently. I'm interested from that perspective. I just don't know beyond that in terms of what else that will offer. Game of anytime it be in that similar sounds interesting. It'd be good, but you don't know anything beyond that because since it's an origin, um, you get to, I guess, understand how it's a place of all women as opposed to how it was maybe at some point before that, maybe. So, yeah, it's something I'm looking forward to, but not something I would say that I'm super excited for yet.
I'm kind of in the same boat. It's not that I think this is a bad idea. I think it's like
No.
we'll get closer to it, maybe see what it's going to look like. I'll probably get excited about it as soon as we see like, stuff from it and it'll look awesome. But for now, as interested as I am in that world, I don't know. For some reason right now, I'm just like, we'll see. It's kind of where I am with it. Back to another film, and this will be our first introduction to the DCU version of Batman. This movie is going to be called The Brave and the Bold. It is an introduction of the DCU Batman, said Gunn, of Bruce Wayne, and also introduces our favorite Robin, Damian Wayne, who is a little son of a bitch. The movie will take inspiration from the now classic Batman run written by Grant Morrison that introduced Batman to a son he never knew existed, a murderous tween raised by assassins. It's a very strange father and son story.
I'll be honest, I'm hyped. Like I'm looking forward to seeing that. I love the dynamic of his Damien being raised by Ra's al Ghul and his whole assassin group, the League of Shadows, I think is what it is. And I mean, that's a solid story. That's a solid, fun twist on adding something new to a character that we all know. So I mean, instead of just having Robin, now we have Robin, who's an asshole, and not only but an asshole, but just as bad, just as almost as much of a badass as Batman, but has no problem killing. Like I had to explain it to my friends. One of my buddies messaged me about it, and he was just like, "I don't get it," like because he wasn't aware. I was like, "No, picture, Batman, but Batman as like a teenager and has no moral compass. When it's like, hey, that moral compass is like, hey, if you stole something, I'm going to cut your hand off. If you killed somebody, then you deserve to die." Like that type of thing. He's like, "Oh shit." I was like, I'm pumped to see them try and do something fresh with the Batman character instead of just bringing in like, hey, we're going to do another Joker. We're going to put the Penguin and, all those classic villains. Look, I love all of them. I love Batman. I think he's dope, but it's like, I'm excited to see a new iteration of Batman bringing that coming forth,
Everything you said, I totally agree. I've heard some chatter of like, oh, I don't want to, I really want to see Robin. I don't like Robin, and I get that. I in a lot of ways, I don't really care about Robin in the Batman comics I've read, but at the same time, and we've had a lot of Batman without Robin, and I think we're due for an interesting, different take on Robin. And I think if there's anybody who can do a Batman and Robin story right, I think it's James Gunn or both of these guys. So I'm excited about it. I'll be interested to see how old Batman is in this. Since he has a kid, if he's already going to be like in his 40s, or is he going to be younger? And he just apparently had this kid a lot younger, a kid that he didn't know existed apparently. But I don't know. I guess if I had to lay down a bet, I actually kind of lean more toward they might make him like late 30s or something like that. Not that it matters, but I'm just curious to see how old he's going to be. But Bobby, any thoughts on this one?
A little conflicted. Not from the fact that sorry, you can see the stream is little wonky, but
Yeah, sorry. It is breaking up a little bit.
yeah. So I think my come using Damian Wayne. In the comics he's 12, and we're reading the comics when he first was introduced, and like you guys said, and like Gunn describes him, he's an SOB little asshole kind of character, and it's it's he really Jeffries.
Yeah, you're freezing off and on, unfortunately.
Uh,
Yeah. But
well, let me just briefly say that I didn't like the character at first when I read him because he's written in a way purposefully that you don't like him. So it'll be hard at first, but I think I could grow to like the character like I did in the comics because I definitely didn't like him at first in the comics. It'd be like liking Joffrey from Game of Thrones. It's like, how can you like him?
I don't know if it's that bad, but all right.
No, he was bad. He was terrible. He was such a dick to every other Robin. He tried to kill Tim. Well, I don't want to get into too much stuff that goes on there, but he was bad. But I think that he will be a good addition in a different way to do the Batman's character. And they do mention in that article that the Bat family exists, so we will get to see like a Nightwing and some of the other Bat family characters. So that is, I again, it's something I like that we're already going to see them at that stage, as opposed to having to start from the beginning and see a Dick Grayson as a Robin and then grow up and then maybe eventually become Nightwing. It's cool that we're going to get them sort of right out of the gate and not have to wait on stuff like that. So I do appreciate that as well in terms of other stuff. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I wonder how they're going to do Damian. And I think I saw someone on Twitter show an image of who they thought could be Damian, which I thought was actually pretty good. But you know how fan casting goes. But they showed the guy who played, I forget the name of his character, 9 from Umbrella Academy. I forget which number he is.
He'd be cool.
Yeah.
11, wasn't it?
I can't remember, but it could be 11.
Yeah, he'd be cool, but he's getting old now. Like, I mean,
right.
Not to be a jerk about it, but he's he's probably in 20s now.
Could be, yeah.
Another live action series next, Booster Gold, an HBO Max series based on a unique, lesser known hero created in 1986. Safran said of the series, it's about a loser from the future who uses basic future technology to come back to today and pretend to be a superhero. Gunn described it as imposter syndrome as superhero. Another character I'm not familiar with, as they mentioned there, but it sounds actually kind of fun to me. I'm actually kind of, I don't know if I'd say excited about it, but I think it sounds like it could be really good.
I'm excited about it. Yeah. The reason being is because, as you mentioned, David, the character came out in 1986. And the reason why it makes me excited is because I remember buying Booster Gold #1 issue with my own money. And it was like the first comic book that I ever can recall buying that was a #1. It was like, yeah, oh yeah, I still have it. Yeah,
nice. Well, with the announcement of this, it'll probably go up in value.
probably. But yeah, it was one of those things where I was collecting comics at the time, but at that time there wasn't like a lot of new #1s coming out for anything. We were just existing in the world that we already had, that they had already created, and you're on like Superman issue 300 and whatever, it's super high numbers of things. So we didn't have any #1. So when that comic came out, I was like, wow, I get to start at the beginning of a brand new character that's never been around before. And I bought that, and I had always kept going with that character for quite a while. So it's for at least the minimum sentimental reasons for why I'm looking forward to it, but also because that character goes on such a growth arc just within the early years, but especially in the later years that the character's been around for now, that he goes in a lot of different places, literally.
Another film up next. Or did you have anything you wanted to say, Jascha?
I don't know anything about that, so like it sounds like it might be interesting, but this is one of the things that is on the very low end of the totem pole when it comes to like my interest level.
Right.
But I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's mostly just because I don't know anything about it. So based
Yeah.
off of just what I read here, and you know, we've said this already. Gunn's really good at making unpopular characters very popular. Um, so and you know, I'll watch it, but I mean, it's, as far as like at the top of my list of things to watch, it's really not up there.
Understandable. Yeah. Like I said, I'd never heard of him before, but I think it sounds fun.
Oh, I've heard of him. I have no desire to really watch
Right.
him.
Next up, live action film. This will be Supergirl World of Tomorrow. Taking its cues from the recent Tom King written miniseries, this movie promises a different take on what most think of when Superman's cousin comes to mind. Quote, we will see the difference between Superman, who was sent to Earth and raised by loving parents from a time he was an infant, versus Supergirl, raised on a rock, a chip off of Krypton, who watched everyone around her die and be killed in terrible ways for the first 14 years of her life, and then come to Earth. She is much more hardcore and not the Supergirl we're used to. I'll say first, I'm very interested in this. I didn't read that Tom King run. I did for the first time read the Supergirl run back when the New 52 started, and actually really enjoyed it. It doesn't sound exactly like this take of it, but in some ways kind of similar, and I thought it was really good. So I think this could be very good. Any thoughts?
This is one that, yeah, I think it sounds interesting from that perspective of her story. I'm not familiar with that run either, but I think that I like that premise, that take on it, especially since we already have Superman, and she would be sort of a little bit more of a harder edge version. What I found interesting about it was that of all the different things that were announced, not just specifically that she was the only female superhero centric show in terms of like a superpowered being, because Amazonians, I don't think they have powers when they're on Themyscira, and Waller's just a human. But it was interesting that that was the character they went with. And then it was like, well, I guess they don't really know what they're doing with Wonder Woman. And then I started to think outside of Wonder Woman and then outside of Supergirl, I was starting to scratch my head as to what other female superpowered characters are there that they could have even used if they wanted to have another female superpowered character. I really couldn't think of anyone off the top of my head that sort of belongs in that sort of Justice League kind of world. There's definitely other characters that belong to other teams, but yeah, I couldn't think of anyone that you would slot in there other than Hawk Girl. But yeah, that was it though.
Any thoughts on this?
Which could have been interesting.
You know, I'm interested. I like the fact that she might be a little bit edgier, kind of like have a little bit of an attitude, maybe even a little bit crazy if she spent this time alone, isolated from the world and everybody, and then just watching people that she cared about die. So, I mean, it just makes for an interesting and complicated character, opposed to, you know, Superman being a Boy Scout, Supergirl eventually kind of being a Girl Scout. It might help change the character and introduce a new take on her and a little bit of edge. So I'm kind of interested in seeing how that works.
Yeah. The last thing that they announced as part of this first chapter, anyway, of the DCU is a film for Swamp Thing, just called Swamp Thing so far. The only thing I have here, it's a horror film that promises to close out the first part of the first chapter. I do remember in the video, James Gunn, I think, makes a point to say that tonally it'll be very different from everything else in the DCU, but it does sound like it will be connected uh, in the DCU. This doesn't sound like it's going to be a DC like Elseworld project, like the Matt Reeves Batman stuff or the Joker.
Yeah, yeah, and he did make a point, like you just said, David, that he has the DCU stuff that will be all connected,
Mm-hmm.
and then anything outside of that is labeled as Elseworlds, which is a designation used in the DC Comics for stories that are told outside the main continuity.
Right.
And with the Swamp Thing, it's an interesting thing because they did have a series that came out for half of a season, I think, on or the W. Well, I don't know. It was on DC Direct, I think, when they first had their app or whatever, and then I think it kind of ended up going to CW after it got canceled within its first season. So the visual look, I remember I watched a few episodes of it. They nailed that. That he looked great as the Swamp Thing. So, and that was in their TV series. So I can only imagine what he will look like in film. And today we had got word, and David Yates also sent this to everyone, that James Mangold seems to be interested in being able to direct this film, which he said he would be able to do. Or I don't know if he said, but I think that it was said that Indiana Jones is already wrapped, and then he has what is it, Chaplin, I think,
No,
to do.
I thought it was
Not Chaplin,
a Bob Dylan biopic. I
Bob
thought,
Dylan.
or
Yeah,
yeah,
Bob Dylan. And then after that, that could be this movie.
yeah. It doesn't sound like they necessarily have a deal in place, but
No,
I know I saw
no.
Deadline reported that there's, I guess, he's circling the project, and actually looks like 19 hours ago he did tweet. Mangold tweeted
Mm-hmm.
an image of Swamp Thing on his, and with no caption, just a
Yeah,
picture. So
yeah.
he definitely seems interested in it. Which,
And
oh, go ahead.
go ahead. No, you go ahead.
No, I said I was gonna say so far. I mean, I like James Mangold. I was also gonna say I'll maybe wait until after Indiana Jones 5 to have further opinion on his work, but
Uh,
um, I'm not against that. I mean, but that
yeah.
yeah, that film sounds like it's a little farther away, not terribly far, but farther. And especially, it seems like it would work if he still has another film lined up to make.
Yeah, and then I saw another quote that I'm looking at again. I don't know where it was quoted from, but Gunn is saying, as far as the slate, he says, and the announced slate is not the order of things happen necessarily. It's a very rough order, and also we are actually developing a few other things as well, but for one reason or another, we can't say them. So I found that pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Also, that even though we kind of went through a lineup in the way that he sort of announced it, that doesn't necessarily mean that is the order in which things will actually end up coming out. And again, another article I had saw made mention of Gunn saying that they're aiming for having 2 movies and 2 TV shows per year come out. So
But yeah, something else we haven't touched on that he does talk about very specifically in that announcement video is that they are going for kind of a different mindset where script is key, that they don't really plan to move forward with anything until a script is complete, and
yeah,
not be in a situation where you're going into production on a film where the script is still being worked on and things are unsure. It appears that they are really trying to stay away from that kind of situation,
yep,
which is good news.
yeah, it is.
The only other thing I was
So
going to mention. Oh, go ahead.
no. Go ahead. I was just gonna ask, sort of as a roundup of overall what you thought of the announcement, and how are you feeling after
Well,
having a day to sit on it.
real quick, I'll say, aside from this new stuff that was announced, it should be mentioned that we also now apparently have a date for the Batman Part 2 in the Matt Reeves DC Elseworlds universe. It looks like the Batman Part 2 is set for release on October 3rd of 2025. So It's safe to say I'm
Yep.
excited for 2025. Just
Yeah.
say that. Um, to answer your question, how am I feeling overall? I am excited. And it's one of those things that the more I've thought about it, the more excited I've gotten. Like when I first watched the video, I was like, okay, cool. Maybe my excitement was a little tampered upon watching the video at first, just because I'm maybe a little jaded when it comes to Warner Brothers at all announcing things. You know, I recognize this isn't Zaslav saying, "Hey, this is all the stuff we're doing," or the old Warner Brothers regime making these announcements. It's, you know, it's these new CEOs of these DC studios, and I do have a lot of faith in them. But after all the stuff that had been announced by Warner Brothers in the past and never coming to fruition, it's hard to get pumped about this stuff and go. But in the back of my mind, being like, is this stuff really going to happen though?
Mm.
But, you know, the more I think about it, I'm like, I trust in him. I trust in Safran as well. This stuff is going to happen. And I think in their hands, this could all be very, very, very exciting. You know, especially as, and hear me out here. Don't misunderstand what I'm going to say about the MCU. I love the MCU, and the MCU is still chugging along, and I think there's a lot of great things to come in the MCU. At the same time, I also think that after the Infinity Saga of films, you know, we're in an era of the MCU where I'm even less familiar with a lot of the stuff going on. And it seems like a good time for the DC to kind of come into its own finally. And I don't know. Some of this stuff is, yeah, stuff I'm not familiar with from the DC universe, but I think it's nice that they're not just jumping all in. I would have been somewhat skeptical if he had just announced, okay, so yep, this is going to be when we're going to do a Superman film and a new Wonder Woman and a new Green Lantern and a new Flash. Like, you know, we're doing the big guy, you know, the big characters like Superman and Batman, and then a bunch of other stuff, and of course we'll get to other big characters and then other small stuff, and I think it's a good approach. So that's my long way of saying I'm pumped. I think this is pretty exciting, actually.
Yeah, I would agree. I think initially I was sort of mixed because the messaging felt a little bit mixed to me. I was confused on a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just like, I don't understand how these things are working. And until my mind can reconcile these other things, it's hard to be excited about some of the other stuff. So eventually I was able to kind of put that to the side and just focus on the things that were announced. And I agree. I think that there's a lot of excitement to be had because I think he's taking some things that we know and pulling them back out for everyone. And then also elevating some things we don't know, and we'll be able to make those household names in the same way that Guardians are. So I like that there's a mix. It's very diverse, this slate. And what makes it also cool is that this isn't excuse me, this isn't even all of that first chapter that we know.
Right.
There's, as I just read from his quote, there's some things that they can't say just yet. So there's more to this than we know. And the fact that Superman will be the first out in 2025 as far as the movies go, I think that was sort of put out there that the what is it, Creature Commandos will be the first thing, I think, to come out. And so to me that says, well, it makes me wonder what's the animation style like, because if that's the first thing that's out, it must not take them long to animate it, because as we've sort of seen recently in the news that Invincible season 2 is coming out, but I think it's coming out like next year, and so I think it's almost like a 2-year gap in between the first season of that and the second seasons. And so I'm curious what the animation style will look like for that
Right.
show, but apparently it will be out probably by next year. So that's kind of cool too, just knowing that we start to see his new universe appear as this old regime's universe finishes out the rest of this year.
Any overall thoughts, Jascha, on this whole announcement?
I mean, James Gunn does a really good job of getting your hopes up. So, I mean, I wanted the DCU to be positive and successful for a long time. Like, I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Is like, I talk my shit, but it's not like I don't enjoy these characters. I don't enjoy it. Like, I've never enjoyed them. I've always enjoyed them. I mean, Superman, I think, is the first superhero movie that I remember watching, and then Batman on Saturday afternoons with Adam West. So I mean, I've been a fan of these characters and this catalog for a very, very, very long time. And I talk my trash because it really bothers me that they just don't know how to get it together. They just now are finally deciding, hey, why don't we just have somebody spearhead this project and we can make this really good. Like, it's, like they're always like, oh, we're not competing with Marvel. We're not competing with Marvel, and we're not going to follow their template. But their template is, one, awesome and making them billions of dollars hand over fist. What's wrong with working with a model that's been successful and just trying to make it your own? Like, they tried to do that and they just weren't happy with it. So then they started throwing stuff at the wall and like, let's just put everything out there. TV, movie, new Joker, new this, new that. Let's just see what works. And the fact that they have some sort of cohesive working plan, I think that, and even the stuff that we don't see, it breeds a lot of hope. So I'm hopeful that it'll end up being cool. Like, I really like James Gunn's work, and I'm hopeful that Safran is going to be just as fun when it comes to adding to it and making it interesting to watch. So, I mean, there's a lot of diversity that they're mixing into this. So it's a lot of different personalities in these characters just by reading some of them, the descriptions of characters that I don't even know anything about. So I'm hopeful that it's going to be good. Just hopeful.
That's a big switch from when you used to feel. So, hey, it's up to James Gunn to not let you down on this one.
I mean, it's like I'm hopeful. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to stop talking shit about DC when it comes to the fact that they don't know what they're doing. Like, I still plan on trying to get my T-shirt, trying to get a T-shirt made, talking some shit, and walk around Comic-Con with it on. Like, I'm all about that. I choose violence all day. Let's go.
I'm excited. Yeah, there's a lot that remains to be seen, but I guess, yeah. Well, we shall see where things go next. With that, unless you guys have anything else, I think we're going to wrap things up. As always, we would love to hear back from everyone listening and watching. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to leave any questions or comments down below. Make sure to like and subscribe, hit that bell icon to be notified whenever we go live or post any videos in the future. You can also reach out to us on Instagram and Twitter at Flickr_effect. With that, I'm David Lott.
I'm Bobby Jackson.
And I'm Jascha Wilson.
Thanks for listening and watching, everybody. Bye-bye.